Hey everybody, I'm Fran Gallagher and I'm your guide to relationships, meditation, and intuition. And today I want to talk about how you access your inner world. So before we can access our inner world, we have to become aware of our inner world. And there are lots of pulls on our attention to attend to the external world, what is all around you. Television, screens of any kind, your computer, your phone, these things really demand a lot of our attention. Maybe next in line, and unfortunately I'm ranking them that way, maybe next in line is the so-called real world. And then last might be your inner world. Well, we need to make the inner world much more of a focus because it is there that information comes from universal mind, from our connection with others, from our connection with our heart, and ideally with our soul. Because we are the agents to bring forth aspects of our inner world and bring them forth into our outer world. So you have to have an inner world in order to do that. Your inner world can be populated with your desires, your deepest desires, your casual ones. Uh, your inner world is full of your senses, and your senses, now that we've gotten there, they are how you access your inner world. So imagine, and you know this, but imagine that you have outer senses, senses you use to pick up stimuli, data from your outer world. So all of these outer senses, they can exist as inner senses. So just as you have the outer sense of vision, you can have the inner sense of vision. Just as you have the outer felt sense, how the outer world makes you feel, gives you sensations, you have the inner felt sense. You have knowings about the outer world. You might look to see what time it is or what day it is. You have those knowings for your inner world. You have inner hearing, perhaps, the potential for it. You can have the potential for inner taste and inner smell. So the first step, again, is to recognize that we have an inner world. The second step is to use your senses to access the inner world. And when you do this, you can begin to notice how you are experiencing what you are experiencing. In other words, what inner senses do you have now? Now, you might be able to add to those inner senses. You might be able to develop more inner senses. So you might not have the full complement. That's okay. Noticing the ones you do have is vitally important. So many of us have the inner visual sense because we've been trained by our social conditioning, by the conditioning from the external world. We've been trained to develop our visual sense. Perhaps these generations who are in existence now, more than any other generation, we were brought up with screens. So it actually takes a lot of conditioning to perceive what is on a screen and perceive it as real. I couldn't quite understand that when I was first told that until someone told me a story. She was in one of the countries in the Middle East in the 50s. And so she lived in a walled estate with her husband who worked for one of the tire companies. And she went to the market. Well, she wasn't allowed to go to the market. She had a houseboy who had to go to the market, and she was trying to get him to buy more tomatoes. And she had a food chart because she had been a first grade teacher. And she showed him the picture of the tomato. and he didn't know what she was talking about. For him, it was a flat image. It wasn't a 3D image. It didn't represent to him a tomato. And she couldn't figure out why he couldn't understand the picture of the tomato is the same as the tomato. So one day he did manage to buy a tomato, and she held it up to the chart, and she wanted him to buy more of those. And she saw the light bulb go on. She saw that he understood that the tomato in her hand and the representation of the tomato were the same thing. So I have sometimes lost my ability to make sense of images, especially if I've been meditating a lot. So there was a billboard on a main thoroughfare in Denver that for a long time had a message that was beef, it's what's for dinner, and it was a steak on a grill. But I was meditating a lot at that time, and I could not perceive a steak on the grill. I just saw different grays and browns and a little bit of red and a little bit of silver. I couldn't make sense of the billboard because I was outside of my social conditioning at that point, during that aspect of my life, during my growth. So I want you to notice, close your eyes and notice if you have an inner visual sense. What can you picture? Can you picture the room you are in? Don't cheat. Close your eyes and then keep them closed and try to picture the room you are in. And notice what happens. Don't judge yourself, just notice, do you have an inner visual sense? With your eyes still closed, can you become involved in the room that's in your head and become aware of any other senses you're using? If you are not using your visual sense, if your visual sense isn't a strong sense for you, what are you using? Can you imagine feeling around in the room? Or do you simply know things about the room? Do you populate it from your knowledge of the room? Maybe you have a sense of the smell of the room, and strangely, you weren't aware of the smell of the room when your eyes were open. Maybe you're using your inner smell. So play around over the next few days and notice again. Notice what your experience is in your inner world, and then notice how you are experiencing it. Notice what senses are bringing your inner world to you. Thanks for joining me, and remember, relationships, meditation, and intuition are all places where we can show up with our true nature. So enjoy your explorations.